Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. This is Joanne Lacey from MEF. Welcome to today's webinar. This is part of MEF's Future of Messaging program. On a quarterly basis, we have an analyst briefing in order to give our members the latest insights, forecasts and updates when it comes to all topics relating to the future of messaging. I'm delighted to welcome today our analyst partner, Juniper Research, and Sam Barker, who's the lead analyst at Juniper Research, who recently launched a report on A2P messaging covering SMS, RCS, OTT, business messaging, providing forecasts over the next 5 years, so 2019 to 2020. Oh no, 2023. There you go. Today's session, you can see the agenda. Then Sam will be sharing some data points and insights from that report. And we're going to take a deep dive from a vertical perspective, looking at different use cases and different sectors when it comes to business messaging, including banking, retail, and a ticketing use case. In terms of the webinar, then please do ask any questions. We've been collecting questions from the members in advance, so we'll go through those as well. But do use the Q&A functionality on Ring Central if you want to ask Sam any questions. This is your opportunity to access an analyst and get his views on this market space. So we'll kick off. We'll break for questions as we go along so that we don't lose the different data insights. I'll hand over to Sam, so welcome.
Thank you very much, Joanne. Let's move straight on to the overview of messaging technologies. The emergence of new messaging technologies is enabling brands and advertisers to move away from the more traditional SMS by offering richer media experiences to their customers. SMS is, of course, going to remain the ubiquitous standard in the mobile industry. As you can see to the right, SMS is essentially represented by all mobile subscribers, and this leaves SMS essentially to act as a fallback from other messaging technologies when looking at a business messaging perspective. However, the emerging messaging technologies, RCS and OTT business messaging, which have been around for a few years now and is still growing, can really be considered competitors, given the different stakeholders in the market and the generating revenue streams that these technologies give. So RCS has essentially faltered in growth of the RCS-capable mobile subscribers, especially compared to the expectations of 12 to 18 months ago. At the moment, we believe that the operators and some brands and enterprises are really failing to see the value of RCS launches. For example, the cost to an operator for launching RCS is quite minimal when you compare it to other operator services. So it's likely to be below $10 million per operator per country. However, when you take into consideration the considerable revenues that could be generated from RCS business messaging, especially in some sectors, RCS must be viewed as a potential future revenue stream in a market where operators are continuing to experience declining ARPUs. And really, in terms of the faltering expectations, OTT business messaging, we could say along the same lines that this market is essentially not living up to the expectations, and the services and the uptake of the services has not quite been what these channels have been hoping for. However, it has to be said that with these two competing technologies, that a failure of one of these technologies in terms of uptake and growth is likely to lead to the success of the other. Given the media-rich nature of these messaging technologies, CPaaS players, they're going to play a pivotal role in increasing the usage of both of these. Obviously, the CPaaS players include SMS, RCS, OTT business messaging, alongside other technologies, including email and push notifications. However, from the CPaaS players' point of view, they're driven by providing as many technologies as possible. So the next 2 years will be very definitive for both of these technologies, as brands and advertisers look to solidify their preference. Obviously, both of these technologies, OTT business messaging and RCS, involve different stakeholders and different revenue models, and they will have implications for operators and OTT messaging channels. However, if you were to look at this from the perspective of the brands, the advertisers, and the end users themselves, there's quite little difference between the impact that either technology will have. So operators, as we know, have already lost their P2P messaging revenues to these OTT players, and now face losing RCS as an emerging revenue stream too, if they fail to capitalize on the revenue streams that RCS can gain. With OTT's entrance into the business messaging market, operators they again face losing potential revenues to third parties if they fail to act. And again, SMS will continue to act as that fallback between the two emerging messaging technologies. And if we move on to RCS business messaging, so by 2023, we anticipate there's going to be 700 million RCS capable subscribers. And by that, we are talking about GSMA standards of mobile subscribers on operator network that is RCS enabled and using an RCS enabled handset. Essentially offering is the addressable user base for anyone that any brands or enterprises that wish to use RCS for their CRM, their customer relationship. This may seem quite low when you look at it from the wider mobile area. 700 million only represents less than 10% of total mobile subscribers. However, Google's recent announcement regarding RCS in the UK and France is quite likely to have an impact on the acceleration of the uptake in RCS. As the little details that we have now, it's to be seen whether operators in the market, how this will impact how they are able to offer RCS business messaging services in the future and what role they will have to play. So the extent of any acceleration of growth, it will become clearer over the next few months, but we do anticipate further growth to happen due to this action by Google. However, this highlights two things regarding RCS. Firstly, the adoption of RCS has been largely underwhelming over the past 12 to 18 months. This is mainly down to the expectations that many stakeholders in the market had, and there have to be a few other issues regarding the complex nature of the mobile ecosystem and how to get a single subscriber enabled onto RCS. Secondly, it highlights that operators are still quite hesitant in exploring the possibilities of RCS. Obviously, this announcement and how it impacts operators' involvement in the area, and essentially going straight to the handset and the subscriber and eliminating the operator's involvement, it have long, farther-reaching impacts on, first of all, the adoption of RCS in terms of how much we can, how far a reach the RCS will have as a technology. But when it comes to using RCS in a business messaging fashion or in an A2P fashion, it's similar to SMS, it seems to be debatable what sort of involvement operators will have. additionally, for RCS to become truly ubiquitous in the way that SMS is, Apple needs to needs to support RCS in some form, whether that will be through a new profile for RCS or through proprietary technology. The end goal should be to have CPaaS players, communications platforms as a service providers, to be able to enable clients to access the subscribers that are on Apple devices. So we anticipate that there'll be a number of SMS users who will also continue to use SMS over the emerging RCS, mainly due to its cost effectiveness and their familiarity with the protocol. It's up to the operators and the CPaaS players to educate these brands and enterprises in terms of what can be done through RCS in terms of its capabilities, as well as the potential for new pricing models, given that RCS could involve forms of artificial intelligence and conversational commerce in the future. However, that does present operators with a good opportunity. So we believe that the majority of RCS business traffic, messaging traffic, will essentially be new traffic rather than any migration from SMS. So that means that operators' A2P SMS revenues, which Juniper Research forecast will be worth $55 billion by 2023 globally, will essentially remain largely intact and will not have any cannibalization from RCS in the future. So we anticipate that there'll be over 56 billion RCS messages sent by 2023. However, this only represents 1.6% of total business messaging, including RCS, SMS, and OTT business messaging. This is mainly due to the impact that SMS and OTT business messaging will have on the growth of these. The growth of RCS-capable mobile subscribers will essentially slow due to handset life cycles and operators' hesitancy in uptaking RCS as a platform. And now we move on to OTT business messaging. So the migration of P2P traffic to OTT channels, it's a trend we've been witnessing for some time. Operators have essentially conceded defeat to the OTT messaging apps in this area. However, as you can see from the figure to the right, we are anticipating that all regions will experience further growth of OTT messaging apps as the prevalence of smartphones and increases in population essentially in developing regions are the ones the factors that are driving the growth of OTT messaging apps. There are obviously penetration rate in some regions are still quite high. But one of the biggest benefits that OTT business messaging channels have over telecommunications channels is their agility, especially in terms of releasing new content and implementing security features rapidly and efficiently. This has already seen users migrate away from the traditional telco messaging platforms to OTT platforms. And this is why we're seeing OTT messaging platforms look to capitalize on their expanding user bases with business messaging solutions. However, as we know, the OTT messaging apps suffer from fragmented ecosystems. Brands and enterprises are unsure of whether a particular client of theirs will have the relevant OTT app installed. This is where the CPaaS providers play a pivotal role in development of OTT business messaging and RCS itself. Not only can they provide both of these messaging, not only can they provide OTT messaging apps and RCS, they also provide SMS and other channels, which allows brands and enterprises to essentially make that choice. So without this functionality, the level of fragmentation is going to leave brands and enterprises unwilling to invest into a channel that has no guarantee of reaching their customers. But the ability to fall back on the ubiquity of SMS is going to encourage their brands to move towards OTT business messaging and RCS as well. So CPaaS players they also have an obligation to educate the brands and advertisers in the market on what can be achieved with using these richer media channels. So with the number of subscribers, we forecast that by 2023 there's going to be nearly 200 billion OTT messages sent per annum globally. One of the biggest factors is China, who make up almost 1/4 of this 200 billion figure. This is mainly owing to WeChat, and it's something that OTT channels in Western markets can certainly learn from. They've integrated a number of value-added services into their OTT messaging app, and in some instances, the app economy is working towards making sure that instead of going to a dedicated app, brands and enterprises are actually looking to implement a chatbot or some form of value-added service within the app itself, essentially creating a one-stop shop. And then I think this point will be a good break for questions.
Thanks, Sam. Okay, so there's a lot to take in there. So we have some questions from the audience as well as those that have been pre-submitted. You've talked about the hesitancy of the operators and obviously Google's recent announcements around Google Guest, and that the next 2 years will be really the definitive period for the success of RCS. MEF last week launched its guidelines that have been developed by members for best practice for RCS business messaging, which is all, the reason that they've been developed is to help accelerate the rollout of RCS and encourage trials and reach alignment. What do you think are the key drivers to enable the adoption of RCS? And a related question from Robson: why have operators not taken the lead in RCS deployment? With Google informing you that they'll go it alone, what will be the role of the operators after Google activates its solution?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. From the operator's point of view, we've seen quite a bit of hesitancy in how they will launch or how they will go about launching RCS. It's a very strange situation because when you look at a number of operator services, it seems to be the operators leading the charge. But there are a small number of brands and enterprises that once educated on RCS, they're very keen to get going on and having operators launched it. So operators, the only reason that they are really hesitant about it is how to turn RCS messaging into a profit center in the same way that they have for SMS. In terms of what that means, how Google does it, how Google is involved, it's still a tiny bit up in the air, but we can imagine a scenario where the RCS client on the phone essentially acts as an OTT messaging app, as strange as that may sound, whereby the client the RCS client may have end-to-end encryption, and the operator wouldn't have visibility of the content of the messages. So yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I think there's lots of questions on this around the recent announcements, and we actually have another webinar dedicated to it next week. But yes, it definitely helps the discussion. Looking at growth, maybe going back to some of the first slides, then obviously today's business message revenue comes from our SMS. Do you think that within 5 years that it's possible that RCS and OTT business messaging will attain the same level of reach as SMS? And related question to growth from Sharif. Do you think the growth of A2P SMS messaging will not suffer cannibalization from these platforms?
Yeah, they're both very, very good questions. In terms of the growth, it is interesting when you talk about SMS. SMS as a technology has been around for 20 years, but the idea is that it's very simple. Every subscriber has access to it. I don't really see any either OTT or RCS being having the same level of reach. In terms of OTT messaging, obviously we forecast that there will be a large number of users, but there's quite a lot of regulation regarding how they can contact the user, when they can contact the user, and that is done by a country level basis. So there's a large number of regulations regarding OTT messaging that is quite often dealt with by messaging providers or CPaaS platforms, and brands and enterprises don't particularly need to worry about it. When it comes from the cannibalization of SMS to RCS, from our point of view, we don't really think that there's going to be too much cannibalization regarding one technology to the other. We feel that essentially over the next 5 years, quite a lot of brands and enterprises will be very keen to remain on SMS for the things like two-factor authentication, one-time passwords. It's simple, it's cheaper, it's essentially more familiar, and that's going to be something that will be a big driver going forward, especially for A2P and SMS. And it will also be a big cause of quite a lot of the RCS traffic that we're forecasting to essentially be what we call new traffic that wouldn't have existed if RCS would not have been launched. So you're looking at the media-rich stuff that the larger companies or the more consumer-oriented use cases are happy to pay for. Where we believe that a vast majority of around 10% is what we're saying, or less than 10% will move from SMS to RCS.
Okay, great, thanks. And continuing that theme, another will RCS disrupt OTT business messaging, or more likely the other way around, assuming Apple comes on board?
That is a very, very good question. I think there's a number of people that are looking for an answer for it. So from Juniper's point of view, we have to look at the drivers and the constraints in the market, what's driving each technology. And when it comes to the fragmentation of OTT messaging apps, the only thing that would stop the growth of those channels in certain areas, let's take developed regions for an example, is that the brands and advertisers would not be certain that their message would reach their intended client. Now, the CPaaS players and the messaging platform providers offer a solution that is able to essentially fall back onto SMS. RCS will obviously do the same thing. We believe that if RCS, the operators were to begin supporting RCS, then that technology would supersede OTT messaging app channels by 2023, owing to the fact that they've got that relationship with operators, and CPaaS players and messaging platform providers can exploit their existing relationships they already have with A2P SMS to offer RCS. And in that situation, you will see platform providers competing on the quality of the completeness of their platform and what functionality they can offer to brands and enterprises.
Great, thanks. We've got a lot of questions, and we do have some obviously more data to share for Sam to share from their report. So I'll tackle a couple more on this section, then I think we probably need to move on. We're just talking about Apple there. Do you see Apple moving into the GSMA standard RCS, so universal profile, or will it stick to its proprietary iMessage?
Yeah, again, it's a very big question when you come to think of how this could impact the market. In some areas, Apple has up nearly 40 to 45% of the subscriber base in certain countries. Globally, it's around 30%. So if Apple was not to support the RCS standard, then you're essentially, your reach is, the limit is 70%. Whether Apple do or not is up for debate. I do believe that at some point in the next couple of years, Apple will support some form of RCS profile to enable RCS business messaging over iOS devices. Probably movements are already going on behind the scene regarding this, and there will be some announcement happening very, very quickly. But I do believe it will happen by the end of 2020.
Great, thanks. Maybe a quick answer to this one, just your opinion. Going back to Google Guest again, considering the recent announcement, do you think it will be Google or the operators that will end up dominating the RCS market?
Well, since Google's been, since Google has got involved with RCS, I think there's always been a bit of, let's say, hesitancy around getting involved with Google and making sure that Google don't essentially monopolize RCS with their profile, and making sure that Google are essentially that Google don't have full control over how RCS is moving forward. I think when it comes to from a business messaging point of view, I think operators have been very, very hesitant already over the last couple of years when it comes to RCS, and Google's announcement is more driven by ensuring that the reach of RCS is growing as quickly as they want to. In the future, operators may probably be as involved in RCS business messaging as they are in A2P SMS, but it's just making sure that Google, the operators become more involved over the next 12 months. Given the fact that RCS requires very little investment from operators and can gain significant revenues, it seems very much like a very small risk on the operator side.
Great, thanks. And one final question on this section, since we've talked a lot about RCS. Question from Nick Lane. What OTT messaging apps are driving the growth of business messaging? Maybe we can look at that in the verticals as well, but
yeah, obviously. Yeah, I can answer this one quite quickly. Obviously, WhatsApp for Business was launched in 2017 in Europe, well, not in Europe, but globally, and we're seeing some uptake of that, although it has been quite small. Also, as I mentioned before, one of the biggest countries, that's seeing these sorts of channels move very quickly is China, where WeChat is essentially on chatbots and other forms of in-app value-added services that subscribers essentially move straight to the mobile app rather than the dedicated app for the service. So China are a couple of years ahead of what could have happened, and they've gone a slightly different route than Europe or North America has. But also on that list, Viber offer business messaging services, and to get around the issue of fragmentation, as I said, it's really up to the CPaaS players to make sure that they can, it's really up to the OTT messaging channels to make sure that they can integrate with CPaaS platforms. Obviously, that does give more options to brands and enterprises, but if their solutions are able to offer those richer media services above SMS, then they should be confident that they would, that their service should essentially see growth of adoption.
Great, thanks. Shall we go to the next section then?
So we'll move on to business messaging in banking very quickly. So we believe that the A2P messaging is going to have a significant role to play in the future of the banking market. Mobile banking, smartphone apps are very, very popular, and banks will obviously still continue to leverage SMS messages and push notifications due to the ubiquity and high open rates. OTT applications are anticipated to have a limited impact in the in the banking market. Mainly, we believe that the legislation and the high level of OTT app fragmentation are going to dissuade financial institutions from launching services on OTT applications. Obviously, given that some of these messages can be what's critical messages, ensuring the termination of those messages to the right subscriber is of the utmost importance to these players. So, however, banking institutions are going to be attracted to the rich media functionality of RCS. It will give banking institutions the ability to offer account management functionality through the messaging client itself. Given the high level regulation, however, especially that governs country level banking industries, the integration of full banking services is not expected to occur in the next 5 years. And that's integration of full banking services into the RCS client. Obviously, security of banking apps at the moment is still a big concern for banking institutions, and ensuring that the security of RCS at the moment is a big hurdle to overcome in the banking industry. So most users now use banking applications, and typically in tandem with text alerts. Most leading banks in developed regions will offer this as a free service, such as weekly balance updates or highlighting when large payments are made, or when account balances are low. So we believe that the majority of A2P traffic in the banking industry globally will be over SMS over the next 5 years. However, we do expect RCS traffic over banking to grow 248% over the next 5 years. So we expect 265 billion business banking messages by 2023. That's broken down with 252 billion SMS, with 7.4 billion RCS business messaging. That's growing from less than 15 million in 2018. And then OTT business messaging, we anticipate to be 5 billion by 2023. So obviously we anticipate RCS to grow significantly over the next few years in the banking industry. However, in comparison, it's very small numbers compared to SMS. If we move on to retail, so we believe that the retail sector will account for a large proportion of, when we're looking at the sectors, a large proportion of the sector-specific traffic. So in many instances, the user has often signed up to a retail account, and that enables the retailer to contact the user through SMS, and that in turn drives A2P usage. So in the retail sector, we view RCS as an additional communication tool that retailers could use on top of existing channels. So customer service is one sector that's primed for disruption of SMS and chatbots as well. We're seeing a number of retailers already rapidly adopting chatbots as a first point of interaction with the consumer, essentially negating heavy investment into contact centers and physical retail stores themselves. So these emerging channels, they need to work in tandem with existing channels in the retail sector, including the websites, physical retail stores, and mobile applications. And given the early limitations of RCS over the next couple of years, and taking into consideration the average user's hesitancy in adopting a new technology in which they could make a payment potentially, we anticipate the development of other messaging channels is also going to need to take place. However, given that many of the retailers, especially online retailers, can be incredibly agile, we believe that the retail sector will be amongst the first to witness some widely used RCS services. And then these will need to include the value-added services such as RCS payments and upselling. And in the future, we believe that these CPaaS players will be gearing their RCS and OTT business messaging solutions towards the retailers primarily, rather than any other sector, especially when it comes to the development of new value-added services over the RCS client. So there is some. So we anticipate that only 7.7% of A2P or business messaging traffic will leverage. Will use RCS technology by 2023. This does highlight a notable problem with RCS and OTT business messaging in the retail sector. So there are a small number of larger advertisers that will be amongst the first to adopt RCS or OTT business messaging first. However, if these companies fail to do so, then a smaller proportion, the smaller advertisers and the smaller retailers are not going to be able to widely see the benefits that advertisers and that RCS can bring to advertisers and brands. So even by 2023, Juniper Research, we believe that RCS is only going to account for a small proportion of what consumers are using, and given the nature of the retail market, brand authentication will be key for the market enterprise validation over RCS, and it's going to be a key differentiator over SMS and OTT messaging channels. The ability to essentially brand the interaction that the user has with brand colors and logos. It's certainly going to increase the trust that consumers have in using an RCS client. So at this stage of the market, ushering in visible identifiers and educating RCS users, it will essentially be key to fostering trust in RCS and fostering trust in RCS in the retail sector. And in order to see these possibilities in the future, this initial adoption from the larger enterprise is essential in order to get users accustomed to using an RCS client rather than a dedicated mobile app or a website or a physical retail store. So we anticipate that the A2P SMS is going to account for 550 million out of the 550 billion out of the 579 billion. In this instance, we believe RCS will grow slightly slower than OTT business messaging. Obviously, retailers will have larger CRM budgets and be willing to, in our opinion, be more willing to invest in technologies or communication channels that are still growing. So we anticipate that in this instance, OTT business messaging will account for 19.7 billion, while RCS will only grow to 10 billion transactions by 2023. As the market progresses and RCS becomes more favourable among all sorts of different sectors, we may see that translate into the retail sector in the future. And if we move on now to the next questions.
Okay, we've got questions on the panel more related to pricing. I'm not sure we'll be able to cover that off in the time that we've got remaining. Sam and Juniper Research have kindly agreed to answer any questions that we don't get to offline. So looking at the sectors, across all of the sectors, when you would preparing your forecasts and speaking to the different verticals, would you say that there is a true awareness for these different messaging technologies from a business point of view, and specifically for RCS? Because it feels that right now there's a need for education of the opportunity, and would just be good to get some insights there.
When it comes to banking, obviously, without sounding like we are attacking a single sector, banking institutions can tend to be very much. They sort of. It's not that they lack the agility that other sectors have, but companies in banking are very wary of things like security and protecting their own clients, much more so than they are in other sectors. So one of the key factors of RCS is obviously the encryption, and this is likely to put off financial institutions until it's fixed, essentially. Retail, on the other hand, these companies are very agile. They're very interested in looking at new technologies. From conferences and other events that you see these companies being educated on, the feedback to operators and CPaaS players is normally very, very good when it comes to RCS. It also seems to be from other sides that some operators, again, themselves are still hesitant, maybe because they're not so sure about how to turn this into a sufficient revenue stream. And there are still some questions regarding pricing and how RCS will be priced from a brand's and advertisers' point of view, and it's still something that the operators are still quite hesitant, and is holding back launches of RCS.
Does your research make an assumption on pricing? So there's a question from Andrew saying that the slide before, if you can just go back to that, indicates that RCS messages will cost the same as SMS. Is that built into your forecast, or do you believe RCS messages will be more expensive?
It's a very, very complicated question. I can certainly give more detail on the pricing in an email afterwards, but just a quick overview. We don't make any. Well, our assumption is that pricing for RCS will be higher than SMS, but there's also the key consideration of how RCS users will interact. Obviously, you have conversational commerce back and forth, and do you want to charge a brand or advertiser for each connection, or do you want to go to a session-based model, or there's all sorts of different models. But for our forecast, we've assumed a price per message basis with a slight uptick from SMS, mainly because we feel that the pricing of if pricing of RCS was too high, it would dissuade potential new entrants from entering in, especially considering it's such a emerging technology. But in the future, we certainly see more complex pricing models coming into play. But that will mainly be because brands and enterprises, especially the larger brands and enterprises, will be much more comfortable in using RCS as their prime messaging technology over SMS, essentially.
Great, thanks. And so just on sticking with retail, so the focus here seems to be on conversational commerce, but very much around from a strategy point of view that this needs to be part of the digital marketing mix or coexist with other channels. Can you tell us a little bit more about the strategies that are being deployed there?
In terms of the what operators can do?
I guess from the audience's point of view of how to pitch this to retailers.
When it comes to retail, the biggest factor for RCS is essentially that interactive element, being able to give clients the ability to make very small changes very, very quickly. It might even be something as simple as changing a delivery date, or in the case of introducing chatbot functionality, you could search through the messaging app. Now, the biggest thing for retailers is they don't want to see messaging traffic that could have been done on their app or their website moved into an RCS client where users may not particularly be very comfortable using it. In order to essentially promote this amongst retailers, you need to be looking at that interactive element. Over the next couple of years, the payment element side of things, users are going to be very hesitant in putting their payment information into an app they're not sure of. However, if you're looking at things like browsing or simple account notifications, the sheer simplicity of using an RCS client is really what should be driving the customers of online retailers to be using an RCS client. Once they're more comfortable with using it through those simple tools, then you can start looking at implementing payment solutions into RCS.
Great, thanks, Sam. Just conscious that we're already at 1:45. Shall we cover off some of the other use cases
Yes.
featured in your report?
Yes, so we'll move on to business messaging in ticketing. So we define a mobile ticketing user as someone who either purchases and stores a ticket using their mobile handset later for redemption. So smartphone is obviously the basis for ticketing, and through smartphone penetration, the developing areas is increasing, driving that usage for using RCS or SMS as the primary contact point for ticketing services. So we believe that the RCS will find a place as an interface between future mobility as a service platforms and ecosystems and the service provider. So mobility as a service is a platform in which multiple services, transport services, including public transport, private taxi hire, even ride sharing and bike hailing, will essentially be integrated into a single app. And in the future, one of the bigger drivers for mobility as a service will even be autonomous vehicles. So the success of RCS in this space is wholly dependent on how the market can consolidate itself. And that includes the partnerships between CPaaS platforms and mobility as a service vendors. And as the market progresses, we're likely to see the pricing models for RCS and OTT business messaging evolve to reflect how the clients can essentially migrate from a small number of messages infrequently to maybe a large number of transactions in a very short space of time. This is what we call a shift to the account-based ticketing. So where a system of billing moves away from single transaction to billing via an account. So this is essentially a good instance for RCS, such as checking prices or looking at routes. Essentially migrating that into an RCS client enables you to essentially create a one-stop shop for ticketing services. We anticipate that the revenues from ticketing will reach 693 million by 2023. But this is because mobile applications over the next 5 years are going to play a big role in the development of this sector. So SMS is likely to remain for the simple use cases and the one-time passwords that we're going to see in this sector. However, as this sector grows and mass mobility as a service ecosystem develops, there's certainly going to be larger opportunities for RCS providers, or those providers, using RCS to capitalize on it. Indeed, we anticipate that, in fact, the early movers and partnering with mobility as a service providers and other transport service providers as soon as possible will certainly present an early mover advantage in the space, considering that the transport industry is set to be disrupted by mobility as a service platform. So one good thing one big benefit that RCS has is that the concept of mass actually relies on open data to operate efficiently. Coalitions have already been set up, such as the Open Mobility Foundation. However, these coalitions still don't have a global standardization, and using RCS certainly could promote this. So taking the US as an example, mobile ticketing already has a strong user base across the transport and events ticketing market. And this is based on the high level of smartphone penetration, which is about 78% last year. So just to quickly take you through some of the how we feel this market will develop. Obviously, SMS will continue to be one of the biggest players, representing 18.3 billion of the 21 billion transactions by 2023. We anticipate that RCS will be 2.9 billion, Mainly, we feel that there will be some players out there that capitalise on that early mover advantage, and that will enable some service providers to migrate their services into RCS as soon as possible. We anticipate that OTT business messaging will represent 600 million. We don't anticipate too much opportunity in this space. Let's just quickly move on to business messaging for operator engagement. So the MNOs themselves, A2P is the SMS is the most common form of engagement with their customers. It should be noted that obviously there are no distinct revenues, as they operate as both the client and the service provider. But operator engagement does provide the perfect ecosystem in which you can develop confidence in RCS amongst the consumers. So the primary limiting factor for the lack of support is still going to come from the handset vendors. Obviously, Google's announcements, we do anticipate that that it will be a success, and that Google will make further announcements moving this into other fields, other countries. And RCS is essentially an opportunity to level the playing fields with OTT messaging apps in terms of their capabilities. So operators, as I've mentioned before, operators do seem reluctant or hesitant to launch RCS, mainly because they're unsure of how to make RCS into a profit centre. However, given the minimal investment, RCS essentially is a very small risk, and given the large revenues associated with it, it's certainly a risk worth taking. Just a quick overview. So obviously 310 billion operator engagement business messages, of which 302 will be SMS, and just under 8 will be RCS, growing from around 60 million in 2019. So that's quite some sizable growth, and it's one sector that we do believe it is ripe for disruption from RCS. And the last sector we're going to have a quick look at is the healthcare sector. So a number of healthcare platform providers already offer the secure text messaging service. In the healthcare sector is essentially aimed at minimizing the cost. Obviously, we need to talk about the fact that many healthcare providers, healthcare markets at a country level operate very, very differently. And essentially, this needs to be taken into consideration when you would be looking at the potential for healthcare RCS, SMS, and OTT business messaging in the market. So we just take a quick example that the US healthcare industry is more geared to a private sector, and they are more likely to adopt new technologies far quicker. If you take Brazil as an example, using OTT messaging apps to contact your healthcare service provider is a widely used communication channel in the country. So there are varying degrees of which technology can be used in which country. It's certainly something that needs to be taken into consideration. So by 2023, we anticipate that business messages, healthcare business messages will account for 4.2% of all business messages globally. However, RCS is going to generate revenues of $61 million for operators by 2023. And one of the big things, very quickly, the value-added services in the healthcare market will be one of the biggest. The healthcare market will be one of the biggest beneficiaries of value-added services by automating large pieces of administration through RCS or OTT business messaging channels. The estimated payback time for healthcare providers of investing in RCS could be less than 12 months. And I think we might have time for just quickly to go over the discount for MEF members. As you are listening to the webinar that we're producing today, we are offering a 15% discount on the research related to this piece. I will give out the discount code in a minute, so have your pens ready. So essentially, yeah, the link there will take you to our research store, which gives you information, more information exactly what's included onto the research piece. And then this includes analysis of SMS, RCS, and OTT business messaging. So if you have any questions regarding this, please don't hesitate to get in contact with Juniper Research. And the discount code is MEF A2P 2019, and that's all in uppercase. And
thanks, Sam.
I think now if we open it up to questions.
Let's just look at the questions that we haven't. And well, I think just since we're wrapping up, then we just took a quick tour of different use cases. One that stood out clearly was around the operators being best placed to raise consumer awareness for the channel. Do you have clear examples of this, of services that have been deployed during your research?
There seems to be very much along the lines of trials and testing from operators at the moment. Obviously, we all know, we without sounding like a broken record, that operators are very, very hesitant. There are a number of operators out there. Sprint was one that immediately comes to mind when we talk about RCS trials. And that's getting in contact with their customers. Obviously, they have access to their own network. They're able to see which subscribers are RCS capable, and then they're able to see exactly how they respond to using RCS over SMS.
And just from all of the sectors that we've covered today, it sounds like so health, the banking, you think it differs on a country by country basis and a sector by sector and platform basis. So RCS and banking, I've heard retail and OTT. Is that oversimplifying things, or is that a fair summary of your forecast?
Essentially, yeah, the forecasts go over the each individual sector. We split it by 8 key regions. There are analysis in each sector and each region regarding our views on the market. We take into account legislation in our forecasts, uptake from operators, how we feel OTT will progress. There's we split each country by each sector, and each sector by each technology to basically give an overview of how we feel each market will progress. And yeah, obviously taking it sector by sector basis and country by country basis, when it comes to companies that are wishing to enter each market, there's a number of considerations that need to be taken into need to be considered, essentially.
And a final question, just to give a clear answer, is there one winning channel, one winning platform when it comes to business messaging?
From our point of view, it is a competition, but when it comes, I think the person who essentially has their foot in the door when it comes to winning the race is the operators with RCS business messaging. I think the fragmentation levels in OTT business messaging are off-putting in too many sectors. Having an operator-led service, which is what many companies have been using so far, that familiarity with using the operators will drive it. The only thing holding RCS back in ensuring that it's the dominant, media-rich messaging channel is the operators' hesitancy in launching it. But I do think over the next 12 to 18 months, we're certainly going to see more education around it from operators and from brands and enterprises. And there will be, within the next 5 years, I think we will all be talking about RCS and not really talking about how OTT business messaging can be used.
Wow. Okay. Great. Well, thank you for your time, Sam, and sharing those insights from the study. Appreciate it. Hopefully we managed to get through most of the questions that were asked. So thank you for everyone for participating today. I've put in the chat the link to the report, also to MEF's RCS best practice guidelines, which will cover some of the questions that got asked, particularly around pricing in great detail, as these are all topics that are obviously discussed within the working group. So thank you, everyone. The session has been recorded, will be available, as will the slides be. So thank you for participating today. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you very much.